Shalom. We've gone through several homonym pairs where the aleph and the ayin both appear as the initial letter of a word, and we're going to discuss another pair today, and that is a pair of af, af. Now, when we look at the verb roots, we see that they're different. The aleph pay root is aleph pay hey, and it is a lamed hey verb, a verb that ends in hey. And the ayin pay is ayin vav pay. It's a hollow verb. So these verbs are going to conjugate differently. And if you need a refresher on that, I'll put a link to the conjugation videos in the description. So they're not going to overlap very often because of the conjugation difference. The verb uf, aleph, ayin vav pay, means to fly. And one place where we're going to see it overlap with the aleph pei hey is here in Zechariah 5:1-2, where it says, I turned and lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll. It says in Hebrew, Megillah Afa. So in this case, this is a present tense, a participle female conjugation, because Megillah is female. Flying Megillah, Megillah Afa. And it's repeated again in the second verse. That is a conjugation for the hollow verb for the third person feminine participle. Again, I answered, I see a flying roll, Megillah Afa. Now the verb uf, to fly, can also appear as a geminate, and I discussed that also in another verb conjugation video, which I will link. So sometimes you're going to see this ye'ofef with a double pay. We don't see that with the aleph form at all. Here's a sweet word. We have talked about how much Hebrew loves this reduplicative sound, and we have af, things that are flying. Afafim are your eyelids. They're the things that fly up and down in front of your eyes. Job 16:16. My face is foul with weeping, and on my eyelids is a shadow of death. Psalm 132:4. I will not give sleep to mine eyes, nor slumber to mine eyelids. Afafim, the things that are flying. As a noun, this appears of, more translated fowl, but sometimes bird. There is another word for bird that you might know, which is tzipor. Genesis 1:20. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that has life, and the fowl that may fly. The of ye'ofef, fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. In Genesis 40:17, we see that it's translated as birds. In the uppermost basket there was all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. Now, if you go to a restaurant in Israel and you want to eat chicken, you will not order tarnigol or tarnigolet. You order of. It's a bird, and the bird you get is chicken. If you want turkey, you have to order of hodu, which means the bird from India. And why is that? For the same reason that we call it turkey. Somebody had the idea that these birds came from Asia in spite of the fact that they're native to the U.S. Here's an interesting related word, ya'af, which means to be faint. Isaiah 40:30-31. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon Jehovah shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. So the word here for weary is an unrelated word. The concept of being faint is having flown for a long distance and then you're tired. We also see once this form ayef. Now ayef is the modern Hebrew word for being tired. It appears to be a metathesis. We talked about that in a different video, and I'll link that below, where sometimes two letters will change places. Jeremiah 4:31. For I have heard a voice as of a woman in travail, and the anguish of her that brings forth her first child, the voice of the daughter of Zion that bewails herself, that spreads her hands, and saying, Woe is me, for my soul is wearied because of murderers. When we come to the aleph form, the verb afa means to bake, and it only appears in this one homonym that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. We have the Megillah Afa, that is the flying roll, from the story of Lot when the angels came and he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him and entered into his house, and he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they did eat. So here, this form is the third person masculine perfect tense. He baked in the past tense, and that's how it's conjugated. This is actually the first mention of matzah in the Bible, is long before Exodus, and you can take a clue from this. If you eat matzah, you better be prepared to run away because something bad is going to happen pretty soon. Now, there is a measurement which is called an ephah throughout Tanakh, throughout the Old Testament, and usually it is spelled with a yud, but here in this case in Leviticus 5:11 it is spelled like the same as afa, and here it's talking about a 10th part of an ephah of fine flour. So perhaps this comes from the concept of a measure that you would use to bake. Now the word af means nose or anger. Many times the word is in the dual for nostrils because you have two of them. There's dual, that becomes apayim. Genesis 24:47. And I asked her and said, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore unto him. And I put the earring, it says in King James, upon her face, literally, her nose, and the bracelets on her hands. In Genesis 2:7, we see the plural, the dual. And Jehovah God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils, apayim, the breath of life, and man became a living soul. As we have seen recently, the nose is also a euphemism for anger. Genesis 27:45. Until your brother's anger, af in the singular, turn away from you, and he forget that which you have done to him, then I will send and fetch you from there. Why should I be deprived also of both of you in one day? Rebekah encouraging Jacob to leave and go to Laban's. Many times when you see this anger, it comes with a verb to burn, as in this example, Genesis 44:18. Then Judah came near unto him and said, O my Lord, let your servant, I pray thee, speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let not your anger burn against your servant, for you are even as Pharaoh. Now the verb to burn in the Tanakh is this chet resh he, and usually it appears in an imperfect, a vav conversive imperfect, and you see yichar. This word is currently a not very polite word for excrement in modern Hebrew. So I suggest that you use it very judiciously if you're talking to a modern Israeli, but you will see it quite commonly to burn, and it's used with anger. So we talked about this in a previous video when we talked about the length of something. And the concept of anger burning in one's nose is not uncommon. We can recognize this picture. The bull has smoke coming out of his nostrils, and he's definitely mad. So erech apayim, the long nose, we see, for example, in Exodus 34:6, and Yehovah passed before him and proclaimed, Yehovah, Yehovah, God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering. He is long of nose and abundant in goodness and truth. The opposite, Kitzar apayim, is a short nose, and we see in Proverbs 14:17, he that is soon angry deals foolishly, and a man of wicked devices is hated. The concept of patience or anger being located in the nose. Now there is a whole other af in Hebrew, which is one of those small particles that can just have a lot of different meanings. Yea, moreover, therefore. The best way we can get a handle on that is to see where it's used. Some examples. So in Genesis 3:1, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which Jehovah God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, af, has God said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden. Genesis 18:23, and Abraham drew near and said, will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? From Leviticus 26:28, Then I will walk contrary unto you, also in fury. I, even I, will chastise you 7 times for your sins. Numbers 16:14. Moreover, you have not brought us into a land that flows with milk and honey, or given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up, in Korah's rebellion. So it seems for the most part like this off is in addition to something, but we can see that that's not the only use. 2 Samuel 16:11, and David said to Abishai, to all of his servants, behold, my son, which came forth out of my bowels, seeks my life. He's running away from Absalom. How much more now may this Benjamin, Shimei, do it? Let him alone, let him curse, for Jehovah has bidden him. So even my own son is rebelling against me. Even more so, this Benjamite, who's not even of the tribe of Judah, he is against me also. But we also see it in the opposite sense. 1 Kings 8:27. But will God indeed dwell on earth? Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built? So sometimes it's how much more, and sometimes how much less. I don't know that we have a good phrase in English that covers the meanings of this, but the best thing you can do, of course, is look at all the uses in Hebrew in the Tanakh. I hope this is helpful to you. As always, Tasimita Einayim al Hashemayim. Keep your eyes on the sky, your redemption draweth nigh. Shalom.